Hi, I'm Lisa Oxford, and today I'm going to be making a dish called chambot. It's a stew with a tomato sauce base, some vegetables, and my ingredient, cannellini, that I've added myself. My nonna used to make this dish. It may have another name in other regions, but our family called it chambot. And it's great with a nice crusty loaf of Italian bread. So let's start with the ingredients. The base, of course, is crushed tomatoes. I know everybody has their favorite brand, so whatever brand you like, most certainly use. Zucchini, potato, onion, garlic. Again, I put the cannellini in. And then for seasonings, salt, pepper. We have oregano and basil, and these, of course, as always when you cook, are for your own taste. And what's an Italian stew without olive oil? So let's start the process. I'm going to come over to the stove. You need a good sized stock pot so that you have plenty of room for your ingredients, and a wooden spoon to stir. So I'm going to take the cover off the pot, and I'm going to start off with a little olive oil. You can always add more as you need it. So I'm going to pour some oil into the pan. When I make this dish, as with a lot of dishes, I don't use a recipe or measure. It's just sort of by instinct. I've made it so many times. The next thing I'm going to do is dice up the garlic. So I'm going to take a clove of garlic out, cut the ends off, of course, and take the skin off. You can put as much as you want. I start with one. You can always add more, but a little does go a long way, especially if you saute it nicely and really flavor your oil with it. So I'm going to cut it up. I'm not a professional cutter here, so it can be tricky sometimes, but we'll cut it into some chunks. And then I'm going to put it into the pan and turn the heat on, turn the gas on. Okay, and I start with it low. You always want to start low because you don't want to burn it. Garlic is great, but not when it's burned. And I'm just going to let this sit for a little while on low. And while it's flavoring the oil and maybe getting a little bit crisp, I am going to go back and I'm going to cut my onion up because that's the next ingredients that I need to put in. So I'm going to cut the ends off the onion. This is just a white onion. You can use any kind you like. I tend not to use a sweeter onion like a Vidalia. It's usually a white or a yellow onion that I use. And always, of course, take the skin off. I know there are so many varieties of onions, but I do tend to use a white or a yellow one just to, because of the flavor. And then I leave it a little on the chunky side. It doesn't have to be very finely chopped. The garlic is a little different because you want to chop it up nice and fine. And I hear it sizzling, so I'm going to check it and make sure it's doing okay over here, which it is. Okay. And now I'm going to keep cutting my onion. I'm going to cut that little end off because we don't want that hard end piece in. It won't be good. And then just kind of cut it up, and it will soften. So if it's a little bigger, it just kind of makes it a little more hearty when it's on the bigger side. And of course, it's making my eyes water. So that's one of the hazards of cutting onions, but it's all good. So again, it's pretty chunky. It will fall apart as it starts to soften, as I'm sure you know. That's what happens when you cook onion. Just kind of put it like this, and now I'm going to put it in the pan and let it get kind of mixed up with the garlic. And now it's really heating up and sizzling. Okay, and I'm going to give it a stir and just kind of get it all mixed up with the garlic. Let it saute just a tiny bit before I add the crushed tomatoes, because then it can start to simmer and continue to soften. looking good. That sizzling is a great sound. They're all cooking up nicely. So now I'm going to very carefully add the tomato, kind of slowly, doesn't splatter. I just kind of shield it with my spoon to help it guide it in, make sure it doesn't splatter on me, and kind of scrape out the can. There's one. Give it a little mix before I add the second. I'm going to turn it up a little bit because now that we have more volume in the pan, it might need a little more heat. So we're going to turn it up a little bit. So it's starting to bubble a little bit, so I am going to turn it down so it doesn't stick. The other thing I do is add a little bit of water to the tomato can, just so we don't waste any of that great crushed tomato. And it sort of thins it out a little bit, and it's got a little more volume to it. So there's one can, and like I said, it cleans it out a little bit too. We don't want to waste any of that tomatoey goodness. Okay, so we have, so far we have our garlic, our onion, our tomato, and the next thing I'm going to do is cut up the potatoes. And I do make those a little bit smaller because potatoes are pretty dense and hard, and they'll take longer than the zucchini. So I will cut those up a little smaller because they do take a little bit longer to cook. So cutting them up, you know, a fairly small chunk, and that way they'll soften up nicely. You don't want hard potatoes in your chambot. So I'm cutting them up, and I always remember the smell of this cooking, and my Nana with her big pot and her wooden spoon stirring it all up. And my family owned a bakery, so we always had really good bread to go along with our chambot, which was delicious. So let's see, cut these up. We actually traveled to Italy about 16 years ago to the village that my Nana came from, which was a great gift to be able to do. We met some relatives, and it was just so great to see the culture and how people there live. They have much fresher food than we do. Okay, cut these in half. I like to get them as small as I can. Okay. I like a good amount of potato. Just makes it just a little more hearty. This one, I think I'm going to put this aside because that has some marks on it that we don't want to put into our stew. And then one more, and we'll be ready to add it. Good either. Okay, one more potato to cut up, and then we can add that and let it simmer with everything else. And what's so great is that as it simmers, it really really absorbs all the flavor of the tomato. So it's a great winter dish. This is a dish that I like to make in the winter. I actually sort of started a new tradition. My kids are adults, and they always come over the night before Thanksgiving. And I used to make pizza. And with the busyness of trying to get things prepped for Thanksgiving dinner and making the dough and the sauce and all of that, it got to be a lot. So last year I said, how about if we have chambot for Thanksgiving Eve? And they were good with it. So that's our new tradition, and I'm fine with it. Plus it's lighter, so it's a nice lighter dish to have other than pizza on a day before you're going to do a lot of eating. So the potato is in, and we're going to let that simmer. I am going to add my spices now, and as I said, this is really to your own taste. I'd have to go easy on the salt because I'm a salt person, but I try to go easy because you can always add that at the table if you feel you need more. A little bit of pepper. And again, you can add more of that. And then I do go a little bit heavier on the oregano because I do like it, and it does add great flavor. So I'll put a few shakes in. Comes out slowly, which I guess is for a reason. You can always add more, but you can't take it out. And here's our basil. We'll put our basil in too. And then we'll let this keep simmering. And the last thing I'm going to do is cut up the zucchini, which is sort of the star of the show. That's the main, I always think of it as the main ingredient. So what I do is I take the zucchini and of course cut the ends off. And I cut them fairly small as well. So what I do, just to make it easier, this one is long, so I'm going to cut it in thirds. Then I cut it lengthwise. And depending on the thickness of the zucchini, I might cut it again. I think this one's okay to keep like this and just kind of dice it up. So get this all diced up and add it, and then we'll be done adding ingredients and we'll just let it simmer. Okay, so the zucchini is all cut up and kind of diced, and I'm going to very carefully add it so that it doesn't splatter all over me and everything else. Put this bowl aside, and now I'm just going to give it one more stir. So for this recipe, I used 3 zucchini. It really does depend on the size of the zucchinis that you're using. I tend to like smaller zucchini, smaller to medium size. I feel like as they get bigger, they tend to be more on the bitter side. So I do use zucchinis that are smaller. But again, it's a matter of taste. So I'm stirring it up, and really it's done. Oh, my cannellini. Can't forget that. So the last ingredient is the cannellini. So I'm going to pour these in, and this will give it some protein. It will make it just a little more hearty. And now we just let it simmer, and I wish you could be here to smell it because it smells really good. 20 to 30 minutes to simmer. You really have to kind of go by. I'll take a fork as it's been cooking for a while and just test the potato and the zucchini. But what I'm going to do is take my spoon out because it's all mixed and stirred. I'm going to put the lid on the pot, and now the work is on the stove. That's it. So now that our chambot has simmered for 20 to 30 minutes and the vegetables are nice and soft and all the flavors have blended, we're ready to eat it. So I'm going to put the lid down. I have a bowl, a nice clear bowl so you can see it, and I'm going to scoop some out into the bowl. And as I said, this is delicious with a nice crusty piece of Italian bread. These dishes were considered peasant dishes back in the day because there's no meat in them, and it's a very affordable dish to make, but it's also very delicious. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you might want to try it. And my name is Lisa Oxford, and I want to thank you for tuning in and watching this presentation, and thanks again.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.